What's going on, guys? Got a little bit of different video here for you guys today. Today I'm going to be showing you guys my solar inverter. I have a little solar system that I built. I did this during my time off when I went MIA on YouTube for a while. I put together this solar system. This is a 10 kilowatt solar hybrid inverter. This inverter is made by a company called PowMr or PowMr. Very reputable company that I found out later on during my research. I've been getting fed up with these power bills for a long time now, as the electricity costs just keep going up, up, and up. And I just wanted to be a little bit more independent, start making some of my own energy, and start lowering my bill some. So I did some research online, looking up different inverter brands, different sizes, started speccing out a system for my kilowatt usage, and that's when I came across this 10 kilowatt unit. Now this unit I actually got off of Amazon. I didn't have a whole lot of high hopes at first, but I went through the reviews to see that they were very positive. I think it had like 4.8 stars on this unit right here. I'd never heard of PowMr before I did my research. I've heard of other inverter brands. Found out that this is a Chinese brand, so I was a little bit concerned about that. But the more research I did, I found out they had an extremely good customer support. So that kind of put me at ease. And then doing some more research on their exact products, I found out that they were really well made and robust. Nobody was really having any issues with them versus some of the other brands out there. Now a lot of people will say, why don't you go and buy an American inverter? And the problem is, China is so far ahead of us when it comes to solar panels and solar inverters and things like that, that it's really no competition for them. Getting an inverter made from the United States or even in a different country with similar specs to this would have run me about 3 to 4 times the cost that I paid for this unit here. And I think I paid around $1,600. This unit does support parallel, which is a really big feature. It allows you to stack multiple inverters on a wall and connect them all up through a parallel data cord. And it allows you to basically double and triple your kilowatts. So this is a 10 kilowatt inverter. If I ever decided I needed more, I can get a second inverter and you tie them together with the data cable and now I'll have 20 kilowatts of power. So that's how that works. But this video is going to be less about the inverter itself and more about the company and their batteries. So these batteries I just picked up not too long ago. I've been saving them for a rainy day, and because we've gotten quite a bit of rain lately and I can't get back out on the property like I did in my last video, I figured it'd be a good time to get these batteries installed, and I figured I'd show it on camera as well, kind of take you guys through the steps in case any of you guys are looking at getting into solar. So these are their batteries. These are 12 volt batteries. They're 100 amp hours a piece. I plan to put them all in series to make a 48 volt battery. So it'll be one 48 volt battery at 100 amp hours when I'm all done with this. This is a good starting point. 100 amp hours will get you by depending on your usage. I looked at my usage and it looks like from my calculations that this should give me about 4 hours of backup, so that's not too bad. Typically when the grid goes down here where I live, it's usually about anywhere from 30 minutes to about 4 hours. So this should get me covered for 90% of the power outages. And then eventually I plan on getting 4 more of these batteries for a total of 200 amp hours, and that'll get me by about 8 hours. So that'll cover me pretty much for an entire day of a power outage. Now my ultimate goal is to eventually have my house and garage being powered by these batteries throughout the night. So at night when the power usage is low, I could be on battery power, and then once sun rises in the next morning, throughout the day, it can recharge the batteries, and then at the next nightfall, I can have battery power supplying my loads. That's how most people do it. Now you can run it and set it up any which way you want. These inverters have tons of settings in them, and even if you have a different brand inverter, the settings are going to be very similar. The settings in the manuals, the way they work, even a lot of these displays and stuff are common throughout all these different inverter brands. And the way that we install these batteries today is also going to be pretty much exactly how you guys are going to do it if you had your own inverter, even if it's not the same company. So now that we got that out of the way, let me show you guys a little bit of information about these batteries. I'm going to run through some of the specs with you guys and show you guys some interesting things I found online. Alright guys, so real quick, I just wanted to show you some of the specs of this battery. This is their website where you'll buy the battery, PowMr.com. And they have lots of other solar equipment that they sell on their website. But here's a quick rundown of their battery specs. You can see here they use grade A cells, and I actually find a guide that proves that these are grade A cells because a lot of these Chinese companies will lie to you. You got a long battery life, 100 amp hours, 12.8 volts per battery. These are LIFEPO4 cells. All right, LIFEPO4. This is important because these are one of the safest lithium cells that they make right now. And that's why everybody uses them for solar, because they're safe, they're not going to cause a fire, they don't explode like your typical lithium ion or lithium polymer battery. These batteries have phosphorus in them, and that's what makes these so much less volatile than the regular lithium batteries. Not to mention they also can pack quite a bit of a punch as far as the amp output and the amp input as well. These batteries can be charged at a very high amp and can be discharged at an even higher amp. You can see here it's rated for 6,000 cycles. From what I gather, most of these batteries, they'll last approximately 10 years from a full 100% charge to a 0% drain every single day for 10 years. So that's quite impressive on a battery. These batteries are just getting better and better. These are actually the same cells that they're using in all the EV electric cars and dirt bikes now, because they're so safe and so efficient. Here you can see they make them in different sizes. They make a smaller version of this battery with the same output and amp hours. Your amp hour, that's basically the fuel tank. So the higher the amp hour rating is, the bigger the fuel tank you'll have for capacity. So these are 100 amp hour, which is a decent starting rate. Most people with like a 54 volt system or even 24 volt system, they'll start with 100 amp hours, and then you can slowly build off from there. You can see here comprehensive protection. These batteries come with internal sensors and an internal BMS board, which is a battery management system. And what this does is it prevents the battery from overcharging, over discharging, over current, and short circuiting. So if you were to short circuit this battery, it would do nothing. It would basically protect itself and shut itself down. It's also got sensors in it, both for high temperatures and low temperatures. And they actually mount these sensors directly to the batteries, unlike many other companies, which I will prove to you guys in some later screens here. You can see here we've got a wide variety of applications: long battery life, high durability, low weight. That is one thing I was impressed with, was how much lighter these are than your typical AGM battery or lead acid. These weigh about half as much and produce about twice as much power. Your typical lead acid battery, you can't ever use the full capacity of it, even if it's a deep cell. They can only be discharged down to like 40% or something like that, where these batteries here, they can be discharged all the way down to 0% if you wanted to. So it's quite impressive. If you do bring it to 0%, often, you will lower the lifespan of the battery, but it's not by much. You know, instead of lasting 10 years, it might only last 8 years, which is still an incredible amount of time. You can see each one of these batteries could power a coffee maker for 2.5 hours, a refrigerator for 6.5 hours, a lamp for 25 hours, and an air conditioner for 1.8 hours. With 4 of these batteries together, with 1,200 watts, right here it shows 1,280 watts per battery, that equals around just under 5,000 watt hours of energy. And with my full loads, it should power my entire home with all my loads on for about 4 hours. Now, if I limit my loads, I can extend this battery usage out to about 14 hours, maybe 13 hours, if I just keep like the lights on and maybe the refrigerator and don't use the microwave or my electric dryer and things like that, you know, my AC system. If I take those heavy loads out of the equation, I can get about 13 hours out of a 100 amp hour pack at 54 volts, which is it's quite impressive. Here you can see the max batteries in series that you can do, which is what we're doing here today. You could put 4 of these 12 volt batteries in series. That's what the battery management system can support. And it can do up to 4 in parallel. So you could have up to 54 volt total with these 12 volt batteries, and you could do a maximum of 400 amp hours when you put them in parallel. And you'll see a little bit more of that as we go on through this video and how I install them. The max discharge rate is 100 amps and the max charge current is 100 amps. So that's pretty impressive that you can charge it as fast as you can discharge it. I'm going to be setting up my amp rating to 50 amps just to extend my battery life, because that's a more constant amperage that won't hurt the battery. Now, PowMr actually recommends you to charge at only 25 amps as a maximum. But if you actually look up the cells that they use in these batteries, they tell you that you could actually charge these at a consistent 50 amps. So that's what I'm going to be setting mine at. So anyway, I wanted to show you that page. And now I want to show you something else. There's a guy by the name of the Solar Squad Ninja. Check him out. I'm going to link his video in my video description. And he does a video series on this battery where he actually completely disassembles it and takes it apart and does full testing of this battery. And that's what led me to buy this battery, because I was very impressed with the way this battery was set up, the way that they built it, and the quality control of the battery itself. So speaking of that, let me show you that now. Okay, so here's the first photo of when he took the battery apart. You can see he cut the lid open on the battery. The second photo here, it shows you the gauge wire. I think he said there were 7 gauge wire, which is perfectly adequate for the amount of amps that this battery can produce. You can see that all the connectors here are bolted in place. Some battery companies will use solder, which is a no-go. Solder connections are really bad, so it's good that they did this. Here's some more shots of that. You can see how nice and neat everything is. And you can see how they use foam all the way around the entire battery, both top, bottom, and all the sides. This will protect the battery from impacts. Now here is really interesting. They actually use a glue for all the connectors, which some companies aren't doing that, and these connectors will come loose eventually, and they could work themselves loose, and you can basically lose your battery. You know, either the battery will stop working completely, or you can fry something. So it's really good that they glue these connectors in place. This here is a shot of the BMS. They use a JBD BMS, which I've looked this up, and this is a very common BMS system. It's cheap, but it works very, very efficiently and effectively, and all the major companies who are building batteries similar to this are using this JBD battery management system. So this is a very good sign that they're using this BMS. Here you can see the individual cells. You got 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are called prism cells that they use. And here on the top you can see that they have vents for the batteries. So if something were to short circuit, these vents would pop, and that's how they maintain a good safety rating and that they don't start on fire, because they have these vents here that will release the energy so that they don't cause an explosion. Here's some better shots of the cells. And here's another one I want to show you guys. You can see that the terminals themselves connecting the batteries together in series, these are actually welded in place, which is what you want to see. Cheaper companies or companies that don't produce as high quality of a battery, they will actually solder these tabs on these batteries, and it's a very, very bad design. You don't want solder. The solder eventually can heat up, melt, and break away, and it always leads to issues down the road. It could lead to short circuiting and many other things. So it's a very good thing to see that they're welding their terminals on their batteries. Here's another shot of the cells. Another thing they use is this special tape here, which keeps all the cells tight together. It keeps them from wanting to separate, and it keeps them from expanding, because these cells can actually swell over years of use. So you have to have some type of way to retain the batteries next to each other. So the fact that they're so tightly together shows that they had foresight and making sure that this wouldn't happen. Here's another good picture. You can see all of the BMS leads. This is for each cell. This is how the battery knows what each cell voltage is at. It's through these little leads here. And you can see, again, they're bolted. They're not soldered. Like I said, other companies will just put a clump of solder on here. Another reason solder is not good is because when you solder these batteries, it heats the terminals up and it actually degrades the batteries. So you don't want to get these batteries hot with solder, and that's another major no-go, which I'm glad that this company did not do. Here's another good photo of it. And here is a photo of a QR scan that he did on the cells themselves to make sure that the company was not lying to us. So if you look here, each one of these cells has a QR code, and you can have a special QR code scanner that'll scan these batteries, and it'll give you the data on the batteries. And you can see that these are brand new cells. They are confirmed that they are brand new. They're confirmed that they are grade A cells, and they are confirmed that they're not old cells. So he did his battery about 8 months ago, and you can see here the date on the battery is 2023. So if you would have seen like 2020 or 2021, this battery would already be, 4 years old before he even got it, which some companies do that. They'll either use old batteries or reuse batteries. Often companies will reuse batteries and repurpose them, and they don't tell you about it. This company is using all brand new grade A cells, as proof by the video that this man did right here. This is a photo of him testing each cell when it came in. So before he put a charger on it, he tested each cell to make sure that the voltage difference between the cells was very minimal, because a high voltage difference in between these cells could mean that you have a bad battery off the bat. It's never a good sign when you have a cell imbalance when you first get the battery. So he checks them and he finds out that the total deviation of these cells was only 60 millivolts, which is really, really good. You can see here's each cell, the voltage of them, and how close in voltage they were. So this is very good to see this. And then on this last photo here, you can see that he actually does a amp hour test on it. So he does a load test on this battery. A lot of times Chinese companies will lie to you. They'll say it's a 100 amp hour pack, and it's really only 80 amp hours because they use repurposed cells and that sort of thing. Or they just lie in general and tell you that it's more capacity than it actually is. Well, at this company, they rated this battery at 100 amp hours, and every test that I've seen, not only this guy's, but other people's as well, these batteries are testing at between 105 and 110 amp hours. So that's well above the rating of this battery for capacity. So that's another really good sign that they're using high quality cells and they're not trying to upsell you on the battery here. So that's what I wanted to show you guys. Hopefully that gives you a little bit more insight. Now there is also a website you can go to that is a data sheet right here, and I'm going to have this linked in my video description, as well as the company itself. I'll have their website right here linked in my description as well. But on this data sheet, you could find all the specs you're going to need to set up your battery with your inverter. It tells you the voltage, the series, it tells you the watt hours, the amp hours, basically all the specs you need, the current, what the maximum allowed current is, what the lowest voltage should be, the highest voltage should be. So this is really important to have this data sheet. So this will be linked in my video description along with their website, so go ahead and check it out. So now that you guys know a little bit more about these batteries and why exactly I chose them, we can go ahead and move on to what you're going to need to install them. So first thing I bought was some 1/0 cable. This cable I got online. I think I paid like maybe $80 for it. You definitely want to get pure copper cable. Make sure it's pure copper and not copper clad, because that's going to run the temperatures up and you can cause a fire. Definitely make sure you get pure copper cable. So I've got about 10 feet of that, which is more than I should need. I've got myself a 200 amp DC breaker. Now you want to make sure that these breakers are rated for the power, the voltage that your DC system is going to be producing. So because it's a 48 volt system, you got to make sure that your breaker can at least handle 52, 54 volts, because when these batteries are fully charged, they should sit around 54 volts. So I would go over that. In fact, this breaker that I bought actually can handle up to 550 volts. But it's a 200 amp breaker, double pole. That's what you need. You're also going to need some eyelets. So I've got some 1/0 eyelets here, 4 of them for connecting the wires to the breaker here, and then I've got 8 more of these to make all the series connections that are needed on the batteries themselves to link them together and to get the wire from the batteries to the breaker. Now, another thing you guys are going to need is a way to crimp these big cable eyelets. So I didn't have a crimper that was large enough. I ended up finding this online. I think I bought this off Amazon as well. It's like $13. It's called a hammer crimp. So it's got like a spring that holds this top part here, and you'll just set the eyelet inside of here. You release the spring tension, which will hold the eyelet in place, and then you set it down on a nice hard surface and you give it a smack with a hammer. Boom, there you go. You've got a nice crimp connector, and I hear these work very well. A lot of people are using these. Another thing you're going to need when you buy your batteries is you're going to need some type of a battery charger. Not just any normal charger, but you're going to need a charger that's going to be able to handle and charge a LIFEPO4 battery. So having a good charger is key, and you're also going to need the charger because when you first get these batteries, there's no way to really tell the state of charge on these things. You can't just check them with a voltmeter like you can on normal batteries, you know, whether it's lead acid or lithium ion or even LiPo batteries. All of those you can test the state of charge by using a voltmeter. But with these, the voltage range is so small on these, which is what makes them so good for solar. Anywhere from 12 to 14 volts, you've got, you know, 80% of your charge range right there in that little bit of voltage. So when you test it with a voltmeter, it's going to come out about the same whether you're at 30% charge or whether you're at 80% charge. You might not notice much difference. So most guys, if they do use a voltmeter, you're going to want to go into the millivolts actually, so that you can actually see the differences, the slight differences of each pack, so you know exactly what state of charge they're at. But even with that, it can be kind of difficult. So you get a battery charger like this one, and what you want to do is you want to charge them all up to full capacity. That way when this charger shuts off, you know each battery is at full capacity before you begin this process. Because once you put these in series, you want to have them at all the exact same state of charge and at the exact same voltage. This charger here I found on Amazon. I think it was like 50 bucks. Really cheap. It's a 20 amp charger. You really don't need any more than 20 amps for batteries this size. If you did need more than 20 amps, I found out that it's cheaper to just buy 2 of these chargers for $50 a piece, which will give you a total of 40 amps charging capacity. You can run them in parallel because a 30 or 40 amp charger will usually run you about $150, so you can get 2 of these for $100 and be all set. We're going to go ahead and get started on this project. Shouldn't be very hard. I'll walk you guys through step by step as I always do in these types of videos that I make, and hopefully you guys can just follow right along and get these batteries set up yourself. Alright guys, so your very first step here is going to be figuring out exactly where you want to place these batteries. You want them somewhere where they're going to be safe. You don't want them to get dirty. If you can keep them clean, that's a good thing. You know, I'm out in the garage, so I want to keep like the metal dust off of them, things like that. So you want to keep them up high, potentially off of the floor if you can. That way they can stay cleaner and don't have a risk of getting metal thrown at them and that kind of thing. You also want to have them in a well-ventilated area so that they can get airflow around them, because you don't want these batteries to get too warm or too cold. These batteries operate the best in temperatures between 70 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about where I keep the shop. I keep the shop at about 65 in the wintertime, and then in the summertime, I don't really think it gets over about 80 in here. Probably less than that when I have the doors shut during the day, because this garage is insulated. So the shade in the morning keeps this garage quite cool throughout the day. So I picked this spot right here. It's a nice little cubby where the batteries can be safe, out of the way. There'll be no wires exposed or hanging out. So I'm going to slide all my batteries up into here first. That way I can figure out exactly how I'm going to wire them in. And if you see, I'll have just enough room here to put 4 of them, just like that. And then what we're going to do when they're all done, and I have them all linked together, is they're going to get pushed back, all the way back like that, and I'll be able to stack another set of batteries directly in front of them, just like that. And they still won't be hanging over the edge, which is good. So that's the plan. I'm going to put 4 in the back, but for now we'll keep them up front. That way we can get them all wired in, then I'll push them back, and then eventually when I buy another 100 amp hours of batteries, so 4 more of these, I will put them right in the front row here. I'll stack them up right in front of the old batteries and tie them all together in parallel, and then that way I'll have 200 amp hours of battery storage. Alright guys, so now we got the batteries in place, we can start thinking about the wiring. So the way these are going to get wired in is you're going to have a power on one end and a ground on the other end. From there you're going to have 3 wires, one here from power to ground, one here from power to ground, and one here from power to ground. It's basically going to make a short little loop. You want this wire as short as you can get it, realistically, that way you have as much amp flowing between the 2 batteries as possible. You also want to keep all of your wires for all these batteries, you want to keep them the exact same distance if you can. You don't want them, you don't want this wire to be longer than this wire, because that's going to cause a resistance difference in between these packs, and you're going to have one battery that's going to drain lower or work harder than the other packs. So you want to keep these as consistent as you can. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove 2 of these bolts here. We're going to throw a couple eyelets on there and we're going to measure to see how short of a wire I can get away with to link these 2 together. So on these batteries, they just have a little plastic cap that you can take off. It's a nice little cap that protects it from getting shorted out if anything gets dropped on the batteries. So these just pull right off and we'll put them back on when we're done. Loosen these up. Then we're going to throw on one of our eyelets. The same with this side. So I did that so that we have a better idea here of the wire length that we can get away with. Alright, so it's looking like, I'd say 6.5 and 7.5 inches is probably what I'm going to go with. 7 is looking pretty good. Still gives me enough wire to where if I got to move these batteries around, I can. Because I don't want them super tight together in case I got to move some stuff around. So I think I'm going to go with that. I think I'm going to go with 7 inches. Okay, so the wire we're going to be using to link them together is probably going to be the red wire, just because that's generally what people do. So we'll get this black wire out of the way for now, and we'll just focus on the red wire here. Go ahead and measure 7 inches out. And this first piece we cut, we'll try out, just to make sure it's going to work and it's going to be enough length, and I don't want to change anything. And then once we know we're good there, we can continue doing the rest of them, because we'll need 3 in total. Okay, now we go ahead and strip this. Got our 2 ends stripped, so now we can feed on our eyelets, and they are a pretty tight fit for this 1/0. But it's what I had that'll work. It's like they didn't give you much room to spare, you know? Alright, there's one. And there's 2. Alright, so now we go ahead and try out this hammer crimp. I've got it mounted in a vise just so I could use it a little bit easier. So we'll go ahead and get one of these done first. So we'll get that lined up in position. And as you can see, we've got a nice crimp. Leaves a nice impression in the eyelet itself and gives yourself a nice solid joint to work with. So now I'll go ahead and get this other side done. Alright, so I decided to move this to the ground because the bench vise just wasn't clamping this like I wanted it to. As you can see, that's a much better crimp than it even was before, so it really leaves a nice big imprint in there. Alright, so now we've got our wire made up. Let's see if it's going to fit here before I go and do the other 2. This 1/0 does not like to move and flex very good, but the stuff I bought is pretty darn good. For the size wire that it is, it's really darn flexible. But you know, as opposed to regular wire or a smaller wire, it definitely doesn't move like that. Alright, there we go. So now we know this wire length works and everything worked out well. The hammer crimper worked out great, so now we can go ahead and get the other 2 built and we'll get them put in place. Alright guys, so I've got the other 2 made up. Turned out really nice. I really do like that hammer crimper. It does a really, really nice job. Now we go ahead and pull off these caps, just like we did the other batteries. I'm glad I didn't go any shorter with this wire, because if I went any shorter, it was going to be probably too tight, and it was probably going to want to separate these batteries and push them apart. So 7 inches seems to be just the perfect length for anyone who's doing this with a 1/0 gauge. I would go about 7 inches. That seems about perfect. Alright, so we got all that situated. Now another nice thing about these batteries, something I probably should have done beforehand, is these handles can come off. I debated on leaving them on, but I think I'm just going to take them off because they're just so easy to get off. So if you want to get them off, they have a little slit right here where you can actually pull the handle through. And you could pull it right on out of there. So if you don't want these handles on, you could easily get rid of them. So I'm going to go ahead and take these off now, just to get them out of the way. Alright, so now we've got all the handles out of the way. It's one less thing obstructing the batteries. Now we can go ahead and test to see if we have 48 volts. We should actually have close to like 52 volts because these are all fully charged. As I said, I charged them all previously. So we're going to go ahead and get a voltmeter. We're going to test this ground to that positive, and we're going to see what kind of voltage we get. Alright, so I've got the voltmeter set up here. I'll go ahead and take negative to negative and positive to positive. And there you go. As you see, we got 53.4 volts. So almost fully charged, very close. If it was fully charged, we'd be at 54 volts. So that's really good. These batteries have sat about 3 or 4 days since I fully charged them. So the voltage is going to settle a little bit. And that's why you see that it's at 53 volts. So these are all fully charged, should be all set. We know that the series connections we made here, here, and here are all good. So we can go ahead and move on to the next step now. Alright, so now we're going to make up the main power lead coming from the positive side of the batteries. Now one thing you want to make sure, if you're not using the right pliers here to strip, is you don't want to cut into the wire. So you just want to be kind of gentle if you don't have a pair of wire strippers that are this large. I'm using this Milwaukee pair that I got a couple years ago, and they're super sharp. So all I got to do is push this wire into it and turn, and it does a really good job of stripping it. Okay, so there's our main positive. Now we can get our main negative here set up. Alright, so now we've got our two main leads here made up. I'll go ahead and install them. Get the positive on the positive here. And for right now, I'm just going to leave it loose. That way I can pivot it. That way they're nice and loose. So now that I got those on, I'm going to go ahead and push these batteries all the way back, because that's going to be their final spot. Alright, so now you guys can see I got the batteries pushed all the way back in their final placement. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed these cables up through behind the bench and up above the bench. And one thing I want to mention, guys, is anything over 30 volts can actually shock you. So being that these are 42 volts to 54 volts fully charged, you definitely want to be careful and make sure you're not touching the main power and ground leads, because you will get a zap. And now we can work on a negative here. We'll do the same exact thing. Get this coiled up and laid up on top of the bench. Okay, so now we've got our main power and ground leads right on top of the bench here. So now I can figure out exactly where I want to put the breaker. I'm thinking I'm probably going to put it in this little open space right here. As you can see, I'm kind of running out of room here. I could easily take down my tools that I have hanging here, which eventually I might have to if I keep adding stuff. But for now, I'd like to keep as many tools up here as I can. I don't know if you guys remember in other videos, but I used to have, you know, all my big wrenches and stuff all on this side. So I've already found a different place to put all those. And I hate to move any more tools than I have to. So this breaker is probably going to go right about here, is what I'm thinking. I'll keep it down so it's about flush with the bottom of the inverter itself. That way those two are on the same plane. That way the wires will look nice when I run them from the breaker into the inverter over there. Now this breaker did come with really long bolts. Bolts made more for like if you're mounting this inside a breaker box. So I'm just going to be using some 4-inch wood screws, which are long enough to go all the way through it and still have plenty of room to bite on the wood on the backside. I'll get one screw started and then I can level it after. Okay, that's looking pretty good there. Go ahead and throw this other screw in. Yeah, that thing ain't going nowhere. And if you guys are wondering what this breaker is here, these breakers are for my solar panels. I've got roughly 8 kilowatts of solar panels up on my shed roof, and I got 2 strings. This breaker here controls 1 string, and this breaker here controls the other string. And then next to them are surge protectors for lightning strikes and power surges and that type of thing. So that's nice to have. Alright, so now we can go ahead and route this main positive wire. And I'm going to route this one first because this is my shorter wire, because we used 3 pieces off of it to tie the batteries together in series. And that way I could equalize the ground wire to make them the same length when I'm finished. Try to give myself a little bit of extra room here. This step for me is crucial because I only have so much cable, and if I cut this too short, then I'm pretty much screwed because I don't have enough to do it again. Go like somewhere around here. So we'll go ahead and mark that. And with the piece we got left here, looks like we're going to have just enough to route it nicely and to go up into the inverter. Alright, so we got a good crimp on that one. And now, hopefully I've got enough room here to squeeze it in where I've got this breaker placed. The line side is on the top here and the load side is on the bottom. I think I'll have enough room. Okay. Alright, so there's the positive all done. So now I'm going to work on the negative off camera. Basically just going to be repeating the same process. Alright, so I've got the ground wire all made up. Connector's nice and tight. Cut it at the exact same length as the red wire. And now we're just going to bend this, kind of shape it into place here. Got to be very careful that we don't let these 2 wires touch each other. Okay, so now we got that done. We can come down here and we can finish tightening up our main lugs here for positive and negative. That's how that turned out. Turned out really nice. So now all we got left is just the final connections here. We got 2 equal length wires, positive and negative. We've got 2 crimps left, which will be going on the breaker side here. And then inside the inverter itself, you'll see what kind of connections we'll be making in there. So let's get those last 2 wires crimped in place, and we'll get this routed into the inverter. Alright, so I've got the last 2 power and ground cables all wired up. I've got them crimped and mounted to the bottom side of the breaker. So now we're all set to make our final connections into the inverter. Before we do that, I just want to make sure and double check here that we have no voltage on the end of these cables, because you definitely do not want voltage on the ends of these when you hook them up to your inverter, because you can blow your inverter up. So let's just check that real quick. Okay, we've got this on DC volts, and we've got nothing, so that's good. It's always good to double check things, just in case this was a bad breaker or something out of the box, you never know. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to shut down the inverter and basically turn power off to everything. Now there is a sequence for that. You have to do everything in a certain order. There's a shutdown sequence and a startup sequence. Those sequences will normally be in your manual. Typically they're all about the same. Most inverters don't change much depending on the brand. You might have like one switch that you need to flip before another, but aside from like a small change like that, pretty much the procedure will be the same for you, but always double check in your manual first. So we're gonna go ahead and do that, but before we do, I just wanna pop this cover off real quick, just so I can show you guys the internals, because once I turn the power off, you guys might not have the greatest view inside of here, because it's gonna get pretty dark in here. Okay, so to remove this panel, on this one, all there is just a screw on each side holding the panel cover in place. And I don't recommend you ever do this with the power still on. Very dangerous, so always make sure that you have all the power off to the inverter before opening this cover panel here. Okay, so this is what the inverter looks like on the inside. You can see over here to the left side, we've got our AC power in and out. Over here on the right side, we've got our PV power or solar panel power. The left side here is one string, and then the right side here is another string. And then right to the side of it here, you can see where the battery terminals go. So negative is on the left side, positive is on the right side. They've even included a fuse for you, so you don't have to actually fuse your batteries before you get to the inverter. It actually saves you a step, and pretty much all you got to worry about is installing a breaker. So now that you guys have seen the inside of this, let's go ahead and shut this whole system down. It's going to get a little bit dark in here. Hopefully you guys will still be able to see, and we'll get these last 2 connections run up through here and connect it up. Alright guys, so the sequence here, if you have a hybrid inverter like I have, which can also be connected to the grid. It can be grid tied or non-grid tied. What you want to do is you want to go to your loads panel. This is where the inverter is supplying all the loads. And you want to shut off your main load, so the power is going to go out here. So we're going to shut off the power. So now we have the inverter not putting out any power. Now our next step is we're going to go onto the side of the inverter right here, and we're going to turn the AC input off. That way there's no AC going into the inverter itself. Our next step is going to be going into the other breaker panel here, and we're going to shut off the main feed coming into the inverter. Got that off. Then our next step is going to be turning off the LCD screen, which is down here. There's a switch for the LCD screen. It's a small rocker switch. So we'll shut that off. And then the last step here is going to be turning off the PV breakers. We can turn these off at the same time. So now we have no loads at all going into this inverter. We have no DC power. As you can hear, it just shut off completely, all the fans and everything. We've got no DC power, we've got no AC power, we've got no power being put out. We're completely off now, and we're safe to work on the unit itself or to make a modification or to add something like we're doing here. So now we've got all the power off. Let me get these last two eyelets crimped in place here. I didn't realize that these were actually going to be a post inside of here. For whatever reason, I was thinking it was going to be a clamp type post like these ones. I did not realize that they were studs. It's been a while since I've been in here, since I first installed it. So we will actually need eyelets in here, contrary to what I said in the beginning. So I'm going to go ahead and get these eyelets installed on the ends of these wires here. I am going to have to cut them to length. So I'm going to cut maybe 6 inches off of these. So once I get them measured and cut and these eyelets put back in place, I'll be right back with you guys. Alright guys, so I've got the last 2 wires here crimped. So now we're going to go ahead and get them put in place. We're going to start with the positive, because that's the one that's farther away. A little bit of a tight squeeze. There we go. Okay, we got the positive on there, now we'll get the negative. Try to get this bent first so it goes in a little bit easier, hopefully. Yeah, that was definitely easier. I don't know how well you guys can see them. You got positive and negative. You can secure them with the nuts. I'm using locking nuts here so that they don't come loose. Alright, so now we've got those in place. Now we can go ahead and restart the startup sequence. So we're going to do that, and this time we're going to have one extra step because we're also going to have to turn on the battery breaker. Alright, so now before we start the sequence, this system here can be also run without a battery. It can be run with or without a battery. So as you've seen before, I was running it without a battery. So the sequence was different before. Before, without batteries, you would just turn the PV system on first, and then you would go on with the rest of the sequence. But once you had batteries, you actually have to turn on the battery breaker first, and then the PV breakers, and then the rest of it. So it's a little bit different depending on what you got installed. But if you got it installed like I do, first step will be to turn on the battery breaker. So let's do that. Okay, battery's on. Next step is going to be the switch for the LCD screen. Once that's on, we can go ahead and turn on both PV breakers. Okay, both PV breakers are on. Then from there we can turn on the main AC feed coming in from the grid, as well as the main AC breaker on the unit itself. So now we have battery power coming in, we've got solar panel power coming in, and we've got AC grid power coming in. So now with all that done, we can close this. And now the only thing that's left is to turn on the output at our load center here. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this now. And boom, we got power again. So now what you're going to want to do from this step is you're going to want to go through your battery settings. Go into your manual and you want to go through your battery settings. There's going to be quite a bit of them that you can change. You'll want to check that with your inverter. Every inverter is different basically from here on out. But basically what you're setting up is you're setting up your low voltage cutoff for your batteries. So basically when you want the system to stop using the batteries, and then you're also going to want to set your charge settings. So where you want the inverter to cut off from charging your battery. So mine will be set at around 54 volts. You're also going to want to set your charging amperage. So however many amps you want your batteries to be charged from your inverter. The higher the amps that you charge these batteries at, the less long they're going to last. But the fact that these batteries can last up to 7,000 cycles means that you're really not going to have to worry about it for like a decade. So you're really not taking much time off of your batteries if you charge them at a higher amp rate or if you use them a little bit more. So I'm probably just going to set mine to 50 amps. The only thing I got left here now is just to install the cover back on the inverter here. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll close out this video. Alright guys, so I've got everything all wrapped up here. Glad we got that project taken care of. This system is going to be much more efficient now having batteries. As I said before, you could run the system without batteries, and it just basically runs off between the grid and your solar panels. But by having a battery allows it to be much more efficient because you're able to use your solar panels to their max capacity, and you're able to actually store that extra energy into your batteries and then use that battery at, say, like nighttime, so you can actually use less and less grid as time goes on. So I'm really excited to have these batteries. Again, these batteries are made by PowMr. Another guy who's got a lot of content about these solar systems that you guys might actually know is a channel called Tony's Tractor Adventures. Doing some research on my own solar project, I actually ran into some of his videos, and it was quite funny because I had already bought the PowMr inverter, and I came across his channels and I found out that he actually runs the exact same setup. Not the same exact inverter, but the same company, and from what I've gathered, he's been really happy with that setup. So if you guys want more details on different specs of the inverter itself and that kind of thing, I would hop over to Tony's Tractor Adventures and check out some of his videos that he's done with this PowMr solar system. So next video, I hope to be back outside. This rain should be stopping pretty shortly here, and the sun's coming back out, so I'm hoping things will start drying up here where we can get back out in the yard and we can start making some videos out there again, clearing some of that land and continuing on that ditch. So that's what I'm hoping for in the next video, so stay tuned. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe as always. We'll see you in the next one.